Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the best basketball card designs for 1993-94. When I put together when I pulled the cards out for doing these lists, I only had 10 cards that I isolated for the basketball cards. So that means I have 5 best of cards and 5 not best of cards for this list. And for the 5 best, I have 2 cards that are just really, really good base cards, and I've been very successful at it. And then I have 3 premium cards that really they're in a whole nother category. So it's fun to see something where it's so distinct, where the top 2 are basically interchangeable, the bottom 2 are pretty much interchangeable, and the one in the middle is very close to the ones at the top. But it's cool to kind of see how clear all of this is and how much fun these cards are in very different ways. The bottom 2 are almost identical, but the top 3 all have their own quality that is very distinct in each case, and each one of the top 3 cards is great. But what carries through with each card is kind of distinct. So, at any rate, getting into it, for the 2 base cards, this is a wonderful mark that they got to in terms of developing basic cards for basketball. And we get to see it really well with the number 5 card, which is NBA Hoops. And for Hoops, this company was finally getting back to what they did in the first 2 years, where they made really, really impressive cards. The designs just came through so well. They're really impressive. They stand out, and they were easily among the best cards across all sports in their years. Then the card brand changed to a design where the cards almost kind of got in their own way. And in some ways it's kind of not fair, because the images were really strong, but the card design wasn't carrying the cards. You kind of had to look through to see the images. And then in 1993, with their 5th set, they wanted to get back to really strong cards, but the big thing was they'd been doing great images on all of their cards, and they just wanted to make sure the images were read well, and that's what they did in 93. Full bleed card, these cards pop right off. It's all about the images, and the images tend to read really well. Great move. And you got to pay attention to the image to make it work, but again, Hoops had been doing that. And they do have one design element on the card, which is the band down at the bottom, which even in this case, they made it partially see-through, so the image goes through the band. So even the card design element allows the picture to be the dominant feature of the card. And then you have the logo down there, which looks really good. But the band is the thing that helps these cards, where if you're not looking at an individual card, it works pretty well to hold together an entire set or an entire page of cards. So that design element works extremely well. These cards, I think, work better in binder pages, but on an individual basis, they do all the things they need to do, because it's a base brand. You get the base brand cards to get the card of the player. That's the whole point. You're going to collect your cards, you get the card, and this is just the card of the player, and it does all the things that it needs to do, but it doesn't do anything more because it doesn't need to. So you're able to really just appreciate the picture of the player, but the card isn't going to jump out and grab your attention. For crying out loud, when I was collecting these cards, I don't think I ever really noticed these cards. I was focused on trying to collect the parallel, which I did do, but that was the thing. I was just moving ahead, trying to get the parallel set finished. That was my whole focus. And it wasn't until recently that I started to look at the cards, and I really liked what I saw. But it's a base brand. A base brand is not supposed to grab your eye. It's supposed to be there for you to collect and be successful in what the card needs to do. And this card did a really good job. So while it's not flashy, it is quite a nice card. And pretty much the same can be said about number 4, which is the Jam Session cards, which is the Heaven Sent Tall Boys. And in this case, they did pretty much the same thing. Full bleed, let the image of the player stand out, a little band down at the bottom for the team element to kind of tie it together. But here the biggest difference is the fact that it's all about the proportions. It's a tall boy. And when God invented tall boys, it was specifically for basketball. This is the natural place. Even though basketball was the third sport to get these cards. Even though that happened, still, these cards were perfect for basketball because basketball's upright and the action tends to be upright. And while with NBA Hoops, they do a really nice job with the images, or with the action of the images. In the case of Tall Boys, it's not so much about the action as much as getting focused right in on the player. So each player stands out more clearly because you're up close. It's really personal. It's almost like these are mini posters. That's what's so strong about these cards. So when you look at one of the Jam Session cards, you're right in there with the player. It's like a portrait, but it's a full body portrait. So it works so much better. And that little element down at the bottom, I'm not a fan of how they designed it, but the fact that they have something like that does help the cards to kind of tie across. I would say this, I designed it a little bit differently, but still, they got the most important thing down right, which was the fact that they have a really strong, focused image, and they don't muddy it up with too much action. And I will note, I think the card back is better than the NBA Hoops, but it's not great because mainly for me, the image on the side is kind of scrunched. But at any rate, the difference between these two cards is kind of minor. But at the end of the day, the Tall Boys dimensions just give it a really cool quality that the Hoops doesn't have. But like I said, those two cards are very similar. When we move on to number 3 and we move into the realm of the premium cards, now, again, we're moving into a very different space of cards where now the cards are art. They really are art, and they do a great job of working in that capacity. Skybox here at number 3 is, I think this is probably the best designed and most elegant card for the year. Just gorgeous the way this came across. And that fits for Skybox. When Skybox got started, they had the full background covered with the different effects is kind of the concept. That's what they were going with. And in 92, they wanted to get into another phase. So they did a full bleed image with a box on the card to have kind of a background covering kind of thing, which was interesting. It's not a bad card. It was interesting. The card stock wasn't all that great, but the card overall was pretty cool. But it was seriously lacking. So even though it had this wonderful strength, it didn't feel fancy. And the card, Skybox needed to feel fancy like they did in the first year. So in 93, they did a much better job with all of that, where instead of having a box of color, now they have a banner, as in literally a banner. The first strength that this white banner has is the fact that it doesn't go all the way to the edge. The picture actually wraps around 3 sides of it, so it feels like it's hanging from the top, like a banner from the rafters celebrating a championship. Now, why anybody would celebrate a Pistons championship, I don't know. Although I do give them credit, they did beat the Lakers a couple of times, so there's that. But the white banner it's got a glossy surface, finally, which means that the white feels very different. It feels very clean. And the team logo down at the bottom is very strong, and so is the text for the player. But because it's a white banner, that means that your eye notices it, but doesn't lock in on it. It knows that it's over there. So your eye looks and goes, okay, yeah, there's that. And it knows it's there and then focuses on the image. That's a brilliant move. The way they pulled that off is fantastic. But on top of that, they wanted to get some Skybox-like element to it, and the way they did that was having the player kind of cross over the white banner and actually have some shadow on it, which makes the card have a whole nother type of interest to it that just makes this a fun, cool-looking card. I do hate the card back. It looks like the 1992 Olympics cards, which just look cheap. But that's the only issue that I have with this card. Otherwise, it really nails it. Even that interesting foil logo. This card is just an absolute success in terms of just being such a clean, gorgeous card. Absolutely pulls it off. But I think it's pretty comfortable to shift from here to the top 2. And the top 2 are kind of interesting because they're slightly different in their approaches. And while one of the cards is a much better overall design, the other card is, I think it's more effective. I think that's the way to describe it. So at number 2, I have Upper Deck. And the reason I have Upper Deck here is because, look, 93 was the year for Upper Deck. I mean, baseball, football, basketball. What incredible cards. And you can see it. You know, you look at the two color fade stripes, the team color fade stripes on either side. There's a light gold banding in there that just makes it really rich and elegant. The images are strong. The colors are all saturated. Just across the board, great cards. And then the white band around the outside, that white border, I'm not a fan of white borders, but for Upper Deck in 93, man, I think that it actually makes the cards better. I'd love to play around with this border and see what it would be like without the band, but I'm really not, I don't need to do that because the way this card comes through is just so exquisite. I love it. And even the card back, they even nailed the card back. But when you go through these cards in binders, you know, in teams, the way that it reads with all of those very strong team colors is just such a strength. This is one of the great card sets for team collections. Absolutely. The one thing though that this is missing is, well, nothing. This card is missing nothing. It's got strong images, focused on the player, great team colors, works well with the image of the card, on and on. What could possibly be wrong with this card to have it at number 2? Well, when we shift over to number 1 with Ultra, here's the thing. This card overall doesn't do any of the things as well as Upper Deck. In fact, literally nothing is done as well as Upper Deck. The design isn't as strong, the images aren't as clear, just on and on. But all of those things are done in a very different way, and that's what's amazing about the Ultra cards, because 93 Ultra in football and in basketball, wow, just amazing. I mean, I love that 92 baseball set, but these cards, they're on another level. The whole little element down at the bottom is a little bit shorter, so it's more out of the way, and it allows for the thinner profile of it allows for a greater strength of the floating boxes for the team colors for the player name. And the gold foil feels a little bit more delicate. The logo, oh, I love that logo, really do. And then the images are strong, but they're not as distinct. The player doesn't stand out as well. I mean, look at this. When you look at the Upper Deck card, there, you know, Michael Jordan pops off, which is ironic when you consider the fact that it's got that light back there. But the image of Jordan, it really grabs you, because the first thing that grabs you is the colors, the team colors. And then that pulls you right into Michael, and Michael's isolated. It does such a great job of really focusing on who the player is. When you look at Ultra, he kind of blends into the action, which normally is not a strength. But for some reason with Ultra in basketball in 93 and even in 92, it works so well. And I really can't figure out exactly what it is. The card is kind of busy and everything kind of gets blended together, but it actually pulls you into the action, and instead of being a silhouetted shot of a player. So here's with Upper Deck, and you get to see a whole bunch of different players that are all lined up, and every single one of those players is very strong, and the cards all look great. But then when we shift over to 3 cards of Ultra, with these Ultra cards, the players aren't quite as distinct on their cards, and yet every single one of the cards, there's no confusion. It really grabs you and it pulls you into the whole event, and that's what it is. It feels more like an event. The cards are more fun. I look at the Upper Deck card. I look at this card and I go, that is a perfect card. It does everything right. I love the way that this card looks. And then I shift over to the Ultra card and I go, this card, I love it. That's all I can say. I love it. I don't have anything else that I can say because I can't break it down and explain why it works better. But that's the thing. For Fleer in 1993 with these Ultra cards, it's like they were artists and they crafted a perfect card. That's the thing. It's that artistic eye over doing everything right. And that's why I like the 1993 Fleer Ultra cards in basketball better than even the Upper Deck cards, which is saying a lot. And so that's my ranking of the top basketball cards of 1993. So definitely let me know in the comments below your take on all of this, where you think there might be a shift. I'm pretty sure that you're not going to have any problems with the ones that are left off, because I think these are hands down the 5 best of all of the designs of 1993, but you know, whatever. I am going to be doing football next, and then I'm going to do the wrap up of looking at all of the different sports. So definitely look out for those videos. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do urge you to do so, and thank you very much for watching.